we're about half a mile outside the village by the racecourse. We're going to talk about the racecourse a little bit later on, but just the first thing to show you is the barley field. That everywhere around the village that I grew up in, Bishopthorpe, was arable land. It was farmland. It's only kind of 3 miles south of York, but already it sort of feels that you've left a city environment and you're into a country environment, a place of big skies. I kept going back on this tour and filming the skies. It was such a lovely day. So I was so infuriated I couldn't be live because, as you can sort of see, these kind of cloud formations. But the visual look and feel that I had through my childhood was in essence this. It's hedgerow, it's arable lands, it's big skies. It was a sense of freedom whereby we could pretty much go anywhere we wanted within reason, back home for tea before it gets dark and all that. So I think it shapes your outlook as a child when you have freedom. And I'm not saying that children don't have freedom now, but I think we probably had a lot more freedom than they would. People are more concerned now, obviously, about what children get up to and risks, and quite rightly so as a parent. I get that and understand it. We didn't really feel so constrained. That's right. There was a helpful gentleman who sort of bickered with me at first, but then got chatting with me. So we are, as I see here from the sign, we're half a mile from Bishopthorpe, 2 miles from the city centre, but it feels further. You could be 5 miles. But before we kind of go into the village proper, I want to start here and to show you my favourite buildings in York. And that is Middlethorpe Hall. And Middlethorpe Hall actually stands there's 20 acres of grounds here at Middlethorpe. And Middlethorpe is the sort of village before Bishopthorpe. And it's a wonderful building. It was built in 1699, and it's perfectly symmetrical, red brick and stone house. I absolutely love this house. And it was built for a chap called Thomas Barlow, who was a prosperous master cutler, a man that made steel instruments, who bought the Middlethorpe estate in 1698 in a bid to establish himself as a country gentleman. So this is a kind of show of wealth, of prosperity, he's on the up, he's doing well, and he wants people to see that he's doing well. So kind of like so many of the grand houses of this time, it's a lovely rose, I brought you down here to look. It's influenced by Sir Christopher Wren, and in particular Hampton Court Palace, that has a sort of similar kind of skyline, this kind of pattern of red brick and sash windows. We'll come back to the house in a minute, you'll see what I'm talking about. This green and pleasant line, absolutely. I learned a new word the other day, they're called coins. I don't know if you've heard of coins before, but coins are the buildings, are the stones. See on the corner, and we kind of come round, see that line of white stones on the corner? They're called coins, and obviously they're an architectural feature, they're not necessarily a structural feature. They're there to kind of give presence and kind of weight and to ballast. So this kind of mix of the white sash windows, the stone coins, the window surrounds, it's owned by the National Trust these days. It gives a real kind of sense of importance. And the chap that owns Francis Barlow and his son, in 1712, they went away on a grand tour. And that's the grand tour, was what Georgian gentlemen did of money. They'd go around the capitals of England, of Europe, and kind of see the beauty of kind of Rome and Venice and Paris and so forth on the grand tour. And they let their house to a lady whose name was Lady Mary Wortley Montague while they were away. And she's a really kind of interesting character. She was born in 1689, and Lady Mary was the daughter of the Duke of the Kingston upon Hull. And in 1712, the year they went off on their grand tour, Lady Mary married Edward Wortley Montague, and they moved into this house. Now, after 2 years, he was appointed as the British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, which is over in Turkey way. And Lady Mary joined her husband on the excursion, where she was to spend the next 2 years of her life. And during her time there, she was. I'm just going to pause this here and just show you a picture of Lady Mary. I don't think you can see her now. So during her time in Ottoman Empire, which is now the kind of Turkish Empire, she wrote extensively about her experience as a woman in that part of the world. And of course, this was the Constantinople under the Ottomans, and she was experiencing Islamic culture. And so, although she kind of regularly socialised in the court of King George I and his son, George Augustus, Prince of Wales, who was latterly George II, Lady Mary is today chiefly remembered for her letters, particularly her Turkish embassy letters. And it's the very first example of a secular work by a woman about the Muslim Orient. So she really was a kind of pathfinder in that respect. And Lady Mary Wortley is also kind of known for introducing and advocating for smallpox inoculation to Britain after her return from Turkey. So she'd experienced, how difficult and dangerous smallpox was. So she came back and pressed for inoculation. And her writings address and kind of challenge the hindering sort of contemporary social attitudes to women and their kind of intellectual and social growth in that era. So I think she's one of those that she is very interesting. Sorry, that's going to move backwards. I should have. So she's a really kind of interesting figure, is Lady Mary. So this we're looking at now is part of the old York Road before they built the bypass. So we've quite literally got an old road running alongside the new road, which is kind of funky. It's kind of road that is kind of largely disappeared. And I did this, then suddenly realised I got like a hurdle over this barrier and thought, hope to heck I didn't kind of fall over, but I managed to hurdle it on your benefit. I kind of suddenly realised once I'd done that I was potentially in deep water, but thankfully I managed to navigate this. So you can see in the distance here the race traffic. This is a race day that I was kind of walking on, so I'm crossing over now to kind of show you the kind of start. And we're down by what they call the 6 furlong start. So for those that aren't familiar with kind of British horse racing, races are run in furlongs. A furlong is an eighth of a mile. So consequently, 6 furlongs is basically it's 3/4 of a mile. So in essence, it's a sprint. And basically, what we're going to see as we get a little bit further down the course right the way up to the kind of grandstand. But first, you just look in the distance here. You see a red brick building. I'm just zoomed in here with the tower, and this is Terry's. So Terry's of York was a major employer when I was a kid. It's gone now. Chocolate factory, producer of chocolate, orange, and so forth. Terry's All Gold. And living so close to the factory had 2 impacts. One is that lots and lots of people worked there. Lots of my friends' mums worked there. So Terry's shift pattern, if you like, shaped our kind of daily life, when mums were going off to work and so forth. The second was there was always this smell of cocoa in the air, perpetually, all year round, all the time. It wasn't the sweetest smell. It was actually quite a deep, rich smell, but it got right into your nostrils. So it's constantly always there. Always there in terms of thinking, about how it impacted on village life, people's mums going off to work, shift patterns, this, that, and the other, but also this smell. So the races was another really kind of important part of my kind of upbringing, because here we are down by the kind of 6 furlong, and this is a place where you just go and wander around. You don't have to pay to be there. And so the 6 and the 5 furlong, a little bit further up, we would spend a lot of time there, and the jockeys would kind of mull around, and we'd chat to them, and bung fags off them. Lester Piggott, the famous jockey, he was a chain smoker. He was usually good for a fag. You would get a cigarette off him, but it meant that you sort of felt like it belonged to us as children. That this environment, you see this big open sort of skies here, both the racers, the racecourse, Naysmire Wood kind of nearby, this all sort of happened, kind of on our patch. And nobody seemed to mind the fact that, gangs of children would congregate by the start of these horse races. And we were to the barriers, but other than that, it was very nearby. And it was kind of great fun. You sort of felt very involved, and it was amazing to think that these things would like be on the TV. And who knows how many times we appeared on TV, on cameras down by the sort of starts down there. But also because this is you see the straight running down there, right at the end of the white building. You'll see is the finish point. Is because this is a sprint race. These horses will set off a tremendous gallop, and they won't stop galloping until obviously they hit the finish line 3/4 mile later. And the thing will take about 45, 50 seconds, somewhere in that kind of region. So full on. So the noise, you get this point of silence where it starts this explosion of noise as all these horses gallop off, kind of down the track. And of course, you try and follow them, but you give up because they just disappear. They went so fast. But that sound, that thundering sound of horses' hooves galloping on turf, it's quite unlike anything you've ever heard. That was Naysmire Woods, by the way, just we panned across on the right-hand side, which was kind of a favourite hangout of ours. So we're walking now in towards Bishopthorpe, the village of Bishopthorpe itself. And we're still probably just about 5 minutes, a little bit more, less than 5 minutes walk away from the edge of the village. But I wanted to kind of show you this because it was so close to the edge of the village. We spent a huge amount of time at this end, just slightly outside Bishopthorpe, I suppose you'd say. And so, having spent so much time here, it seemed like it was important to include in here, as well as, of course, Middlethorpe Hall, which is lovely. So we're crossing over now the A64, the road that links Scarborough in the east to Leeds in the west. And until sort of the early 70s, this road that I showed you a minute ago would run straight through the village. So it was fantastic. They built this bypass to basically bypass Bishopthorpe and give us a kind of fast route out. So it was very easy. All my family lived in the West Riding, so we would have headed down in direction of those traffic down there on a pretty much weekend basis. Every weekend we were heading out to the West Riding. So it was very, very easy to get to and from Bishopthorpe. So it's this weird combination. You see again arable farmland on the right-hand side. So you've got barley fields, you've got wheat fields everywhere you look. But you've also got this transport infrastructure, and you've got York being sort of 3 miles, I guess. But this big sky. You could be miles away from anywhere when you look at the sort of sky and the landscape. So it's a really interesting kind of combination of urban, rural, transport connectivity, village life, outdoor life, river life. It's really interesting. So we're coming to the kind of crematorium now, and this again had a major impact and influence on the village. There's only one crematorium in York, and as a result of that, it means pretty much all the funerals, the vast majority of funerals, happen here. So day after day, you would have funerals in the village. Okay, they would come to the crematorium, and then they'd go for a meal, generally speaking, at the Ebor pub or one of the pubs on the main street in Bishopthorpe. So funerals were absolutely a sort of daily occurrence. Weirdly, as a kid, of course, you have no sense of mortality, do you? But at the same time, I'm not going to lie, it did have, and I'm not going to lie, there was a smell. There was absolutely an aroma that came from the crematorium that was running all the time. The chimney was pumping out a rather sweet-smelling odour. So combined with the chocolate and the crematorium, it made for a kind of a strange sort of combination. I'm not going to lie. But equally, McVitie's biscuits there. My grandma and granddad were cremated there. My dad was cremated there. So I've got sort of family links into the kind of crematorium. But for the most part, I don't sort of see it that way. I see it, or remember it, as being this thing that brought people. It really odd smell, Sandy. Just brought people to the village every day in kind of sadness. So the interesting aroma of death, yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I mean, as I say, these are the factors that kind of combined. Chocolate smell, the crematorium, all these funerals, the races, the big open skies, the farmland. I can't explain how those things hang together, other than in Bishopthorpe they do, and they kind of impact on your outlook, especially one of the paths down to to the river. It's gated off, so I've cut off at this point. But down here, either side of the Archbishop's Palace, you've got these little routes down to the river. So we're sort of coming into the village proper now. So that probably seems like a really disparate range of influences that I can't really kind of explain or justify, other than to say they all played their part and that we took them for granted. It was normal that there were several funerals every day passing by us, which sounds odd, doesn't it? You know, as a child, you just don't, you're not aware of that, but we were very, very aware. And you know, that characterised the village in such a sort of strange kind of way. It was passing by the kind of walled garden of Chapman's estate, just on the edge. It is like a secret garden. Memories, absolutely, Leslie. It is. I know. I'm sort of slightly ahead of you in the chat, but don't worry about that. It is. They're the formative memories that sort of impacted on how we kind of thought about things and sort of saw things and what opportunities. So, being honest, lots of funerals, you know, meant that if you went when they were closing up at the Ebor pub and went to the kitchen, at the end of the day there was loads of free food, free sandwiches, always food left over. And that sounds really, really kind of like, does it sound harsh? No, it's not meant to sound harsh at all. But you know, as a kid, you sort of get used to the rhythm, so you know, of how things work. And one of them was because there was funeral suppers on every day, funeral dinners, buffets, whatever we call them. There was always food available, and you attune to these things. You kind of learn. It sounds awful. It's pretty cynical. I don't think we ever felt it was cynical at the time. It just felt like this was our village and this is how things worked. Was that, you know, by about 4 o'clock you could go and get fed for nothing at the Ebor. Does that sound strange? I hope it doesn't sound heartless. It's not meant to. I'm simply just trying to give you a sense of what it was like here. Exactly, kids' parents is different. Yeah, with free food. You know, we see it given. You get given a jam sandwich put in your pocket and say we'll see you at tea time. So it wasn't like we were overfed. We didn't have big pack ups or lots of food. But there we go. Yeah. So that was kind of. So we're coming into village proper now. So we've got St Andrew's Church coming up here in the centre of your picture is about to emerge. Lovely old Victorian church. Actually, the third church in the village. Quite a recent church. This one dates from about 1898, I believe. There's been 3 churches in this parish. The first was actually built in the year 1205 on the banks of the River Ouse at Bishopthorpe. The second was built on the same site in 1768, not this site, I'll show you what it is in a minute, by Archbishop Drummond after the demolition of the first. But it was continually flooded, and you'll see why in a minute. And so the third and present church was built here on this land between 1885 and 1899. It's quite a recent church. And what's unusual about this church is I often bring you into kind of churchyards and we'll have a look at graves. What's unusual about this one is, and again, I know that many of you that grow up in small towns or villages will know this, is when you walk in and you see the names of the graves, you know the names of the families. This isn't, I wonder who these were. I might not know exactly who they are, but the village names you recognise that these people didn't kind of move on. You know, so Terry family, the Terry Chocolate Factory, there's Simon Francis Terry. You know, it's people from the village, people that lived nearby. It's the same names. This is a Terry Memorial as well, I think. Yeah, this was Francis William Terry. They kind of come up and sort of crop up. So they have kind of very different feeling that there's people in this graveyard. That this chap lived about 4 doors up from Donald James Barron. He was Sir Donald Barron, actually. He was in charge of Roundtree Mackintosh factory. Much bigger house than we had, but about 4 doors up from us. But yeah, there's people in this graveyard that didn't make it, that died as teenagers, died in car crashes. Obviously, people's dads, mums, aunties, grandparents, families that I remember. So there's always a strange feeling, I think, in walking through graveyards when it's kind of, you know, your sort of places, you might say. It's a kind of different feeling, isn't it? But nonetheless, very nice. Traditional yew trees, of course, yew bushes, very, very old. And by tradition, the Vicar of Bishopthorpe also serves as the domestic chaplain to the Archbishop of York. I think in a minute the bell starts tolling here. Just turn this up so you can hear it. I got there just at the right time. So hopefully you'll be able to hear the bell toll in a minute. Or I'm going to lie to you. But isn't it a beautiful sky, the light today? It was lovely. So all our school things happened here. After the Archbishop of York's infant school and junior school. So everything we did here, I was actually a Catholic, but they thought that was like a mild eccentricity. Hey, that's nice, dear, if you tell you're a Catholic. They didn't really kind of know what that was, or certainly didn't kind of respect it. Everything was the Church of England, so we're going to push through this. But here's the lovely old archway, the Lich Gate to St Andrew's Church. So this is where we go with the Cubs and the Scouts. This is where we would do our kind of plays and performances, our Christmas do's. It was Michelle. I thought. Can you hear bells tolling, or did I? It may be because I've turned on the decibel audio. I can't hear it, but I believe you should be able to hear now bells tolling. So again, just a place that you spent a great deal of time. That was just, again, I'm trying to think of a kind of good way to put this. That these were the places and the spaces where the kind of memories, the events of the year. So just over the fence over there, just behind that brick building, we go for bonfire night every year. So wonderful. Walking down on a night, your mum and dad in the dark, your wellies on, going to the field and watch a massive fire, bonfire. Your eyes would dry out, because it was so hot. Baked potatoes, hot soup, hot dogs, all that kind of wonderful stuff. And standing watching the fireworks is wonderful. All these kind of memories. So it's a lovely Victorian church. It kind of looks like a medieval church, but it's not. It's a Victorian one. But I think it's a really good Victorian church. So we're kind of walking through now the remainder of the churchyard towards the palace. We've got Church Lane running on our kind of right-hand side. And the sort of church is the first building that you come to walking into the village. I'm glad you enjoy the sound of the bells. I'm glad you could hear them because I had to turn the decibel audio down so that repeating, so I can't hear what you could hear, but I'm glad that you can hear the bells. So I just timed it just perfectly. I didn't know, obviously, the bells were going to ring, but it turned out that there was a bell ringing practice, which is nice because it's lovely to hear the bells, isn't it? It's treacle, absolutely treacle toffee and Parkin, lovely, lovely, lovely. The nice things of kind of a bonfire. It's just special. That's just a fun night. And these days, I know a lot of you on here will be American, so you probably be surprised at this. But when I was a kid, Halloween wasn't so big. It's got a lot bigger. For my kids, it's been much bigger than it was for us. I mean, we did things for Halloween, but bonfire night was much, much bigger. Very, very close together. So again, the War Memorial now. Every village, every location has got one. This is the story of England, is a story of every village, every hamlet, every town, every settlement suffering its loss. So we get our first glimpses now of Bishopthorpe Palace, seeing the stable block on the kind of left-hand side of the picture, all rather grand. There's a brewery at the back of there as well. Historically, the Archbishop of York has always brewed beer. So that's stuck in behind the stable block. So the palace itself, which you can see in just a moment, dates all the way up to the 13th century. Okay, and that's when Archbishop of York, Walter de Grey, brought the village of Thorpe St Andrew. That's what it was called in those days, Thorpe St Andrew. So it wasn't actually Bishopthorpe at this time. And he demolished the old manor house for St Andrews and he built the new Bishopthorpe Palace. So I'm just going to pause if I can, or rather, I won't pause it. Because it'll go back to the beginning. So the palace sort of sits behind the gatehouse, and he used a lot of the old stone in the manor house to create the new building. We can't see masses of it. I'm walked down a little bit, but they get terribly sniffy if we invited into the palace. So this is the home of the Archbishop of York. And most of the building here took place between 1480 and 1500, when Archbishop Rotherham added the north wing. Little memorial garden here to Princess Diana. And then the third stage development took place in 1761 and 1769. And that's when John Carr, now I'm sure that's a name by now many of you will recognise, talk about John Carr an awful lot. Famous York architect, he designed this wonderful gatehouse, and isn't it just stunning? Recently renovated, the clock has recently been done about 10 years, I think, ago. That was all kind of redone, but what an entrance, what a sense of arrival. So he created this kind of Gothic stable block and gatehouse. So it really is a remarkable place. And so, of course, what it meant was that we grew up sharing the village with the Archbishop of York, the second most senior churchman in the country. So again, in terms of influences, this was very big. I went to the Archbishop of York's junior school and infant school. And so it meant that we had sort of proxy involvement, if you like, in the palace and with those relationships. He would come into the school, he'd come and talk to us, we'd do kind of nature walks around the grounds. Whilst it's not normally, especially sort of open widely to the public, for us, each term would walk in the grounds. From time to time, we'll go in the house. He'd come and do assemblies with us, and so forth. So again, he was an influence, and he's a sort of hybrid. The palace, it's a private residence for the Archbishop, but also the kind of the personal apartments in there. But there's kind of public rooms and offices for staff and so forth. So it's a headquarters as well. So we're into Chantry Lane. Chantry, of course, from chantry priest, from cantare, the Latin to sing. There were priests who sang masses for the dead, the chantry priests. And a beautiful set of houses down here in Bishopthorpe. Some fabulous houses on the way down to the river. The house sort of coming into view, the White House, wonderful, huge mansion, was rather scandalous. It was bought sort of semi-derelict in I would say the late 80s by a family, and I'm not going to lie, they were a bit sort of rough diamond, this family, and they owned an old people's home here, and they got lots of old people in, but they got prosecuted for neglect. I don't know exactly what was going on, but it became a big scandal in the village. The Graves family were taking people in, and they weren't looking after them. So that was all kind of rather scandalous. Just as you'll see through the trees, we're going to show you little glimpses of the palace. We get a few more views as we get further down, but it's a very, very kind of private space, really private space for the Archbishop. And I say, if you're invited into there, it's great. You can go and walk around, but otherwise it's not open, and the whole sort of sense is part of the village is kind of screened off. But this is where we spent huge amounts of time. So heading down towards the river now, which the sort of second half of the tour is going to be sort of a river walk, and everything was enormous. The house where we lived was much smaller than this. Don't think for a minute that I grew up in houses of this sort of size. I didn't. But again, you were always aware that there was this real wealth that was visible. So this is our first shot of the original church now. So the Archbishop's been in the palace from 1241 to the present date, which is quite amazing, isn't it? And this was the original church where, of course, he would go and pray. So the first church built on this site was in 1205. The one you're looking at here was built in the 1760s. But it suffered from the fact it was just by the river. So it was a kind of it's a poor location, shall we say. So there's an ancient church here from the 13th century, which was pulled down in the 1760s. And they built this new church, because the church had been very, very prone to flooding. Not surprisingly, given its location. So they pulled that one down, and they built this new church that you can see the remains of here on precisely the kind of same site. We know that the first church was probably built in an early English style of architecture, and that in 1202 the Priory of St Andrew was founded in York by a chap called Hugh Murdoch. And he endowed it with rents and lands in the village of what became Bishopthorpe. And it's more than likely that Hugh Murdoch, or the monks of the Priory of St Andrews, were responsible for building the first church here on this location, for use of the people in the village, hence its name, Bishopthorpe. This, of course, is St Andrew, because the village at that time was Thorpe St Andrew, and later Andrew Thorpe. So Bishopthorpe itself wasn't used until the 15th century. What we know is that Walter de Grey, who was the Chancellor to King John and Bishop of Worcester, attended King John at Runnymede in 1215 and as a reward for his loyal service, he was appointed the Archbishop of York in the same year. And Archbishop de Grey was the guy who bought the land in this village, owned by the priory and the monks, and he set up the parish of Bishopthorpe, so in 1215. So we're coming down to the river now, and again you're going to get a perspective of the palace. I've tried a number of ways to bring it in, but with the trees in full foliage, not easy. And the last time we came down, this is where I encountered this chap who was a bit sort of thrown by me at first, and realised that I knew what I was going to talking about. Because these paths weren't here when I was a kid, or the metalwork wasn't there. We could kind of stray down. But this is where we spent enormous amounts of time. So you're looking at the River Ouse, and the boat that is going past us now, or just coming into your picture now, is travelling towards York. So that is probably 2.5 miles upstream. You can hit York. And if you keep going, of course, you get north of York and eventually end up in the kind of the Yorkshire Dales and so forth. Heading in the direction we're walking in, we're walking out towards Hull, the Humber Estuary, the North Sea, and Europe. So that's kind of downstream, as you might say. So Selby is the first kind of major settlement here. I love watching these. Is it perambulas they call them? I forget what they call them. Where the boat sort of creates these lines of continuing motion. It's like an echo, isn't it, in water? I absolutely love watching them. Always have done. I can't tell you how much time we spent down in this part of the village, just hanging out really. And there's a tree stump that I'm going to show you in a minute, and it was wonderful because the tree here used to lean right out over the river, and so we were taking an ash tree there, you see, lean right over, and it had a really good sort of Y shape set of branches, really strong, where you could both sort of sit either side. So you'd sit right over the river, legs dangling, and oh god, hours and hours and hours we can spend there. You're watching the boats go by, constant stream of boats on the river. Pleasure cruising then as now, hugely popular. I'll take a drink. There's something about the river that really calms me. The water, the reflection, these movements. And this was, again, I think, another very important formative influence as a child, insofar as that we had hours to kill. I mean, hours and hours and hours to kill. Full days to kill. So as long as the weather was fine, no tech then, absolutely. Leslie, there's absolutely no tech, no distractions also. So the way that nature sort of plays itself out was much more apparent. We weren't walking on with our noses especially into screens. We were watching. Some fished. I was never much of a fisherman. I never had hanging out with people that fished, but I was never bothered about fishing. But a lot of my friends did. But just the movement, the constant movement, so that even when nothing was happening, something's always happening on the surface of the water. Rather trendy kind of designer homes down here now, weren't there when I was a kid. So we're coming into the kind of the marina area now. There's a bigger marina about kind of maybe a mile and a half upstream of Neighbourne, where they're really expensive is. It's kind of Bishopthorpe Marina and Boatyard. And what I kind of really like about this area, that's a restaurant by the way coming into view, the Bosun's Chair, which is to sit under, because right at the bottom there's a canopy, so on rainy days you'd sit underneath that. It's closed about 4 months a year because it's really quiet in winter. Is these areas down here where the boat launches, which I think I'm about to walk down onto. And I absolutely love where you get that kind of the merging between, you stood on a launch, so obviously you've got concrete under your feet, but the river's lapping at your feet. So it's a bit like standing on a sea. It's kind of the river version of a seashore, isn't it? But often you don't get it on rivers because you usually have riverbanks and there's differences in height between where the water is and where you are. But with these launches, because obviously there's so many boats down here, you get these areas. I used to love to just sit and be where kind of land and water meet, and you get just lovely views. I just love the reflections and how things just kind of, they kind of move, the constant movement It's like watching television to me. I could watch a river for hours. It's still there's the palace. So zooming in there. That's the Archbishop's Palace on the waterfront, kind of looking down onto it now. So you can see he's got a really nice pad for himself. Um, so if you're going to cruise up that way, you get a really good look at the Archbishop's Palace. Very nice indeed. Very good job, you've got to say, Archbishop. Yeah, definitely like Tom Sawyer. I think there's a lot of those elements that that we spent so much time down here, and whilst in summer, as it is now, it's busy and there's people around. For most of the year, it isn't. Some bloke having a bit of a kip there, I noticed. Um, so it's a lot smarter, as we said, than when I was a child. Not that it was bad; it just wasn't like this. It wasn't as manicured, and there's a lot more orientation now towards visitors. So I hadn't seen this before, but there's a guy here doing what they call these stand-on like surfboard, paddle boards, or whatever. Hire a kayak. So I may come down here actually. Hire a kayak and actually take you on the river, like Stefan's done. I'll kind of steal Stefan's idea because that'd be quite good fun, wouldn't it? To sort of go for a little drift down the river when we gimbal. That'd be quite good fun. But sort of hiring out stuff, kind of for the days you see kind of coffees. None of that was here when I was a kid, but this campsite was. So again, the fact that where you live, you've got people coming on holiday. A bit like the funerals thing, you've got people coming to your place, they're not from here, but they come to you, and it all just adds to the kind of sense of the slightly otherworldly quality of Bishopthorpe, which I know probably sounds like I'm over egging. I don't mean to, but it felt like there was all these different elements going on: boat people, holiday people, people going to funerals. They were constantly descending upon you. This ever-changing kind of cast of characters, and then the locals and the villagers, and so on and so forth. So we're kind of walking now into. I think it'll be fun. The canal boats are great, aren't they? The boats area, and I have to make a confession here to say that as far as we were concerned, the boats were fair game. They were absolutely fair game because for at least 4 months, if not 6 months of the year, this area down here was deserted. And as far as me and my friends were concerned, is these boats were provided for us to play on and hang out on. Now, I never ever, I promise you, never ever vandalised boats. We didn't, but we used to sit on them a lot and hang out. So if you had a boat down here, you'd have had kids on it over winter because they do things like this. They put a little gate on here like that, right? And you just use that rail and you just walk down the side. You know what kids are like, right? We'd be there and we'd sit on the boats. It just what you did. It just felt like it was provided for our entertainment. Which nowadays, if I owned a boat, I was supposed to be cross, but it didn't feel like that at the time. Patty, people saying they can look even more forward to going for a cottage with a daughter. That'd be wonderful, daughter and grandchildren. Get away from it all. Great outdoors, Patty. That's it. That's what you want, isn't it? Kind of big skies. The sound of water if you can get it. Lots of fun, walking, chuck a ball around. Read a book, chill out, create some memories. So yeah, so as far as we were concerned, they were just like big toys for us. And does it sound bad? I know it probably does actually, because we were trespassing. But I'd be in no doubt whatsoever, 100% we trespassed. But it wasn't a sort of like a trespass where we'd do harm. People wouldn't even know we'd been there. We'd just sit and hang out on their boat for an hour or two in the afternoon. But this would be in winter, or they wouldn't be there. They wouldn't come back till the spring. River Town, oh, fantastic, Michelle. These were paddocks, by the way. Passing, so no horse. I was a bit disappointed. I was hoping I could show you some horses. Now you see the kind of long grassy. Obviously, they need some horses in there. So again, lots of horses, big equestrian area. I agree, trespassing doesn't apply to kids, does it? So you can see the kind of water troughs down here for livestock. So again, it was very much part of the nature of it is that kind of animals to one side. So the village from here is on like the other side, of a couple of fields away. So it feels like you're miles away from anywhere. And for the next few minutes, we're going to get a few glimpses of the river, because these days now they've kind of got wise and they don't want kids, little urchins as we were, sitting on their boats. So it's a lot more secure and a lot harder. You would still get in, but they've made it harder. And they're there a lot more. People have kind of like, they heat their boats and stuff now, so they're there a lot more of the year. But you know, so you don't see so much. But I was really captivated by the sky when it's kind of coming down. It'd be like scrimping, absolutely. Um, and so quite for the next few minutes, I do quite a lot of just focusing on the sky, because it sort of defined us. We'd lie back on these boats and just look up at the sky, you know, and we had our kind of toes in the water and our head in the clouds. That's the kind of the best way I can describe these endless long days of freedom that we had. You see now the proper fences, but as if that put you off, you'd be in there in 2 minutes. Um, so part of me was going to do it now, but it'd look a bit odd, wouldn't it? A 50-year-old bloke arrested for trespassing, just to show that you can. But they would, those defences would not have held us at bay for long. Has to be said. But yeah, so water really important. You know, people having lot blow up dinghies, you know, those sort of things to play on. If we saw people leaving little boats around, not boats like that, but little launchers, would put them on the water. You still see them from time to time down the sides, little launchers. So river and river play was kind of a really, really important kind of factor. Given so that you see the rooftops there, that's actually the village. We're not at all far away from the village, but it really feels like you're in the kind of countryside. You know, you felt this tremendous sense of being outdoors, being kind of having the complete run of the place, which is marvellous. Now, although to be honest, my kids would think it was boring. It's really weird how I think, you know, our outlooks and expectations have changed, in that they would feel this was a rather unstimulating environment, whereas to me it was a place of tremendous scope, because it was so. There's a launch there, that would have been in the river. Um, did your mum and dad know where you're up to? Did they care? Yeah, they cared. They knew if I was in trouble, because it was a small village and people would find out. So as long as you're behaving yourself, no. They would. My mum would say, you know, get out from under my feet. You know, and there was nothing to be at home for. Television wasn't on during the daytime, or a bit of children's TV on some holidays, but that finished by about 10:30, and then you'd be kind of right out to the Keble Park in the distance there, the big housing estate. There was nothing to do at home, so you know, you got your bike and we all met up, and then you'd be down to the river, or Acres miles, wherever we were going that day, and that was it. So yeah, it wasn't a case of I don't think they didn't care. It was more that's what we did. You know, Dad was out at work. He wouldn't have known, and you came back, you know, for your tea or before it was dark, depending on what the rules were on any kind of given day. But that wasn't just me. This was all the kids I hung out with, you know, which wasn't huge. Maybe 6 or 8 of us regularly hung out together. But we were all essentially under the same, you know, kind of, you know, instruction. You just behave yourself, basically. As long as you behaved yourself, they didn't get any complaints. But you couldn't get away with anything, because everything. You know, the village copper, PC Baird, lovely guy, lived at the Bridge Road, huge guy, about 6'4". Spent his entire career as a PC, never got promoted, and then eventually retired. But you know, he drank my dad. And the thing that he would basically say to us, you know, do you want me to tell your dad what you're up to? So it was never in a case of you get reported, you know, kind of officially. It was that the village policeman drank with your dads in the village pubs. Do you know what I mean? So you couldn't get away with stuff. Do you know what I mean? So you didn't. We weren't bad. We were just free, in a way that my children haven't been. And that's fine, that they see value in other things, and they love having their YouTube, their devices, and this, that, and the other. But I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade my childhood for theirs, even though I'm not going to say it was all, you know, sunshine and roses, because of course, it's even fires. Like, they just leave firewoods as well. So getting cold in winter, we were in Scouts. We got taught to prepare fires, so we'd have fires, not on people's boats, but we'd have fires. So there was always ways of making it work, kind of all year round. So Dawn was outside much of the time as well. I think it's our generation, isn't it? You know, those of us, I'm one of my 53, some of you a bit younger, some a bit older. It's just a familiar sort of pattern. I think that's true whichever side of the Atlantic you're on. Is that we grew up expecting that we'd be out and doing things and making your own entertainment, making your own adventure. For most of the time at home, that there wasn't the entertainment there for you. So it was with your mates, and off you went. And some days were better than others. There was downsides, stinging nettles and tripping up and cutting your knee and all them things in case you get in a fight. But for the most part, there were things you could just manage and cope with, and that was very much kind of day-to-day norms. So again, people these days, like all this drying of wood. I think people live on their boats again a lot longer these days, a lot more of the year. So consequently, they're chopping wood to heat. They've got wood burners and so forth. So holiday lets these days kind of down here. So when I was a kid, you'd see people down here. Maybe I'm going to say sort of late March, they might start turning up to kind of clean things up again. April, May it gets going, but it wouldn't really start in earnest until sort of May time, and then they'll be there about sort of September, and then it'd start tailing off, and then by October, November, they're putting their beds, their boats to bed for the winter. So that gave us, in essence, really from sort of November through till March, where the place was our own, and you didn't really see anybody. So when we come down here in this area, this is where, as I say, all the boats are moored. That's it. Home when the streetlights went on, KCM. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter where you came from. Parents are the same at that time, weren't they? Your kids were out, but you came home to eat, and they want out in the dark, and no 24-hour CCTV. Absolutely. So I think this is what's kind of neat about this, isn't it? Is loads of dens, Susan. Yeah. So dens. By the waterside, we kind of love doing stuff down there. Again, I've got to be cloud obsessed this day. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going a bit overkill on it. But so again, you can't even see the rows of houses, but it's not far away. But it's that sense of being, when we're down here, we're kind of away from it all, and so that was kind of tremendous. So we're going to walk up now towards the Iron Bridge, the kind of last part of the tour. And we are walking into, so Les didn't have a TV in her case. I mean, we had one TV in our house. No, I tell you, we had two actually. We had like a big colour TV in our lounge and like a little black and white TV. The only time we were allowed that was when you were poorly. And they brought it to your room and they'd like tune it, had like a metal aerial on the top, you'd twist round. You didn't have like remote control buttons like that. You had to turn the dial thing and then twist the aerial so you got a half decent picture. It was black and white. So that was like the best thing about being ill, was you had the portable TV in your room. But other than that, TV was in the lounge, and it was never our choice. It was always my dad's choice or mum's choice or whatever, what we watched. So, but again, there wasn't TV in the daytime. There was what they call the test card. So you went out and did things, hey ho, make your own entertainment, right? But as we're walking up to here, I thought I'd tell you a bit of history, because I've been waffling on. So talk about the Battle of Fulford. You might not be aware of the Battle of Fulford, but it's one of three absolutely key battles that really shapes English history. So as we kind of walk along here, we'll talk about the Battle of Fulford. And what I did is I kept sort of, because we're now able, these are the fishing spots, by the way, so a place you can spend the afternoon fishing with a licence. We're kind of walking along here up towards the Iron Bridge. I'll tell you about this, but I'll keep popping down strange sides of the river to get rid of these. So the Battle of Fulford, I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but it was fought on the outskirts of the village of Fulford, which is on the other side of the river. So Bishopthorpe and Fulford, in essence, almost kind of face each other. A little bit further up, just as we go up to the Iron Bridge, you're coming into the bottom end of Fulford. And it was fought on the 20th of September in the year 1066, when King Harold of Norway, who was also known as Harold Hardrada, which means hard ruler, and Tostig Gudmundsson, his English ally, fought and defeated the northern earls of Edwin and Morcar. So it's quite bizarre to think, looking at this kind of bucolic area, that we're not walking into the area of a battlefield. There have been huge arrays of Viking boats down here, where I'm going to show you, where I'm showing you, if you like, the views onto the water. Imagine your Viking longships, and you can hear the battle cry of Viking warriors. That was on this soil. Isn't that amazing? utterly amazing. It really kind of captivates you, doesn't it? So Tostig Goodwinson was the English king's banished brother. So Harold Goodwinson was the English king. And so Tostig had allied himself with King Harold of Norway, and possibly as well with Duke William of Normandy. We don't really know exactly who he was allied with, but there's no reason behind his invasions. What we do know is that Tostig invaded England. So the Anglo-Saxon king Edward the Confessor died on the 5th of January 1066 without an heir. Edward the Confessor, very, very pious man. So he founded Westminster Abbey in London. So the only surviving male member of the royal family was a chap called Edgar the Atheling, which is a youngster. And he was the young son of Edward the Exile. But he was only aged about 14. And at this time, there was no automatic right to become king. It was decided by the Witan. Okay? So on the day of King Edward's funeral, the 6th of January, Harold Goodwinson, who was the Earl of Wessex, the most powerful nobleman in the country, rushed to London, and there he was crowned king in the Abbey of St. Peter of Westminster by Ealdred, known as Westminster Abbey. And Ealdred was the Archbishop of York. So Harold Goodwinson had been elected as king by the Witan, who the Witan are, in effect, all the powerful noblemen come together, hold a council, and decide who is going to be the next monarch. So they gathered in Westminster to celebrate the Feast of Epiphany, the 6th of January. But two powerful earls, the brothers Edwin of Mercia and Morcar of Northumbria, actually challenged his authority. Now, sources indicate that Harold moved north to confront them, to square up for a battle. But in the end, he secured their loyalty by marrying their sister, Edith, the widow of Griffith of Wales. So now Edwin and Morcar, the earls of Northumbria and Mercia, are on side. And what we know is that by doing this, Goodwinson increases strength in the north. And these men, under Edwin, Earl of Morcar, become the first barrier between Harold Goodwinson, the English king, and Harold Hardrada, the Viking king, who's coming to claim the throne. So Tostig, the exiled brother of Godwinson, also felt he had a claim to the English throne. And during his exile, he lived in Flanders, which is kind of northern France, Belgium, from where, according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, he invaded England in May 1066 against his brother. So Harold Hardrada, like Tostig, was another claimant to the throne. And Hardrada set sail for England in September 1066. And he stopped in Orkney, which I think Paul might be visiting, Edinburgh Paul this week, to pick up supplies, and was later reinforced by Tostig, who brought soldiers and ships. And they sailed together along the River Ouse towards the city of York. And York, of course, as we know, had been for 200 years a Viking stronghold. So it's from here they were going to launch their invasion of England. So we've got Hardrada, we've got the Viking Norsemen, we've got Tostig, the brother of the English king, and York is the scene where they decide they're going to have the set-piece battle. And sources say that in the month of August, Harold Hardrada and Tostig set sail across the wide sea, across the North Sea, with a favourable wind, and landed in Yorkshire. That's at the Humber estuary. So they arrived at the mouth of the Humber on the 18th of September in 1066. And having disembarked from their ships, their armies moved quickly towards York. And on the 20th of September 1066, they were confronted by Godwinson's earls Edwin and Morcar, very near here. So Edwin had brought some soldiers to the east to prepare for an invasion by the Norwegians. And the battle started with the English spreading their forces out to secure their flanks. On the right flank was the River Ouse. On the left was Fordland, which is where the university is now, a real swampy area. The disadvantage of this area was it gave Harold a higher ground, which was perfect for seeing the battle from a distance. Another disadvantage was that if one flank were to give way, the other would be in trouble. And if the Anglo-Saxon army had to retreat, it would not be able to because of the marshlands. They'd have to hold off the Norwegians as long as possible. And what we know is Harold's army approached from 3 routes from the south. He lined up his army to oppose the Anglo-Saxons, but he knew it would take hours for his troops to arrive, and his least experienced troops were sent to the right, and the best troops were here on the riverbank. Just coming into the Iron Bridge, I'll pick up this story for you in just a moment, but this was kind of a major sort of play centre for us. So the English struck first, advancing on the Norwegian army before it could fully deploy. Morcar's troops pushed Harold back into the marshlands, making progress against the weaker section of the Norwegians. However, this initial success proved insufficient for victory, as the English army, as the Norwegians brought their better troops to bear upon them, still fresh against the weakened Anglo-Saxons. And Harold brought more of his troops on the right flank to attack the centre and sent more men to the river. So the English now sent men to the river. The invaders were outnumbered, but they kept pushing and shoving the defenders back, and the Anglo-Saxons were forced to give ground. Edwin's soldiers were defending the bank now and were cut off just up from here by the rest of the army from the marsh. So they headed back to the city to try and make a final stand. This, by the way, was an area that was a prime hangout. A bit territorial, so it was always a bit of a tussle, who got to hang out in there, but ready-made hangout, of course, for kids. So the Norwegians were kind of holding the riverbank, and they found a way to get round the English, and they cut them off by the riverbank, just on the opposite side, just where we are now. And this led to a rout. They were outnumbered and outmanoeuvred. The defence were defeated. Edward and Morcar survived, but the fight was lost. York surrendered to the Norwegians under the promise that the victors would not force entry to the city. So instead, the Vikings took the fleet 5 miles up the sea, up the river, to Stamford Bridge. And Stamford Bridge, of course, is the second battle, 7 days later. And in this case, Harold Godwinson was forced to bring his army that had been waiting on the south to now come up to York to fight the battle. They managed to defeat the battle of an almighty effort, defeated the Vikings at Stamford Bridge, but then their army was exhausted and weakened. And at that point, that's when they heard that the Normans, under William Duke of Normandy, had landed on the French coast. So they had marched all the way back another 200 miles back to the south coast to fight the Battle of Hastings. And of course, they were exhausted. They'd lost many of their best troops in the 2 battles at York. So the 2 battles at York kind of really shape the destiny of England. It's kind of, you can't kind of overemphasise how important these 2 battles are 2 weeks apart. Sorry, 1 week apart in September of 1066. And then in early October 1066, you have the Battle of Hastings. But the die is cast here up in York. So we're clambering up the side now of the Iron Bridge, just to finish out the tour from the top and to give you a kind of view of the, just for those who kind of like to know about kind of numbers, about 10,000 troops altogether fought on the Norwegian side, and the English side about 5,000. And we believe that the estimates of death toll was about 15%. So around about 2,000 troops, we think, somewhere in that region, would have died on that day, very near to where we are now. So this, we're on the Iron Bridge now, a place we used to jump off as kids into the river. Formerly the site of the old York Scarborough railway line, now taken out. It's wonderful sculpture. Indeed, one of the extremely lucky trees. So you can see there on his fishing line, he's got the Flying Scotsman, because this was a bridge the Flying Scotsman would pass over on a daily basis on its way up north, now kind of cycle track, kind of reclaimed. Looking up now towards Acaster Malbis, the next village up. Those who are good memory might remember the Clifford's Tower tour, the Richard Malbis, one of the architects of the massacre. Got a village named after him, the next village up the road there. So a cycle path, some interesting kind of graffiti down here, all about the Fisher of Dreams. There he is. He was created as the tranquil fisher, deliberately, neither male nor female, dreams by the riverbank of a time when the Flying Scotsman still steamed over this bridge. And if you ever look up at him, you'll see that just in his moment, there's a Flying Scotsman over the bridge. Is even they have a lovely peaceful time. If you look behind him, a dog is cocking its leg to have a wee on his bike. So it's kind of perfect. England would be very, very different today had we not had that course of events. So as if with York being the second city. So sort of poetry here, or prose. Very kind of pro cycling, flat as an aerodrome, perfect for cycling, recycling, upcycling. So this area very much kind of characterised by banks, and York's very much kind of green outlook. York's very green agenda. York, of course, is a city of two halves, one of which wealthier than the other. So, of course, it's fair to say that it's probably the wealthier part of York that is more attuned to the environmental side of things. But I think I've naturally not become green. I was green. I was always green because I grew up in this environment. Um, this is the river. So that's looking back down where we've come from. Again, with that wonderful kind of cloud formation. I think when you grow up in and around nature and the riverside and the planting and the fields, um, the boats, the marina going, imagine in the days there, Viking boat, you have a greater sense and affinity to the land, to the environment, to nature, to the seasons. I don't think you have to be told to care about it. I think it comes naturally, partly because you observe, you learn about the plants and the trees and the weather, these big skies, what you can kind of deduce of what's going to happen later on, whether you're going to have a drive to, whether you're going to need to sort of seek shelter. I think you grow up more attuned. So I don't think it was ever a difficult ask for me to become environmentally conscious and aware. I think it was something that was just part and parcel of growing up in an environment such as this. Um, so there we go. That's the end of the film that I shot that day. I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope that kind of made sense and it wasn't too much of me just um, rambling on. Um, I hope that you can sort of understand how that environment and those experiences had a shaping. Like clay, kids like clay, aren't they? They're moulded by the environment, by the experiences, by the adults around them, by the kids around them, and so forth. And that environment, those sort of experiences, um, was very much, um, pertinent, I suppose, to our outlook, our experiences, our expectations, our source of venture. So that's making fires, going on boats, building dens, being on the river, going on the building sites. Actually, behind where you couldn't see, Keel Park was being built. An awful lot of time playing building sites as well. So yeah, thank you for joining me. I know that everyone was disappointed I couldn't do it live. So was I. I know that there are people that are down on at home tours, and uh, that's their choice. It ultimately is up to them. Humphrey's feeling a bit sorry for himself today because he's got not a lampshade but like an inflatable version of the lampshade on him because he keeps picking at his scab. So he's had to have that on. So he's got the lampshade of shame at the minute, which he's not very happy about. But he's doing okay. He's just fed up really, and we're all getting a little bit sort of drained by it. But thank you, Patty. Thank you, Leslie, Susan, Poppy, KCM, everybody, Natalie, Linda, everybody who's been on. You've been super company. Michelle has been on as well. You've been super company. Treast, Sandy, Dawn. I've just to say, just tried to Patty, of course. Just tried to share with you an insight into where I came from, the path, and as I say, all those early parts as well. Hanging out at the races, the chocolate factory, the funerals. It's all added up. And of course, not too far away from York. And the road that whizzed you across my grandma and granddad's and my mum's family over in the West Riding as well. So they were all little building blocks that kind of shaped me. So there you go. As close as I come perhaps to revealing too many inner truths. Hopefully that's sort of forgot. Don't forget to like everyone. Thank you, Patty. That's a great reminder. Hopefully that gives you a bit of insight into who I am, where I've come from, and the bits and pieces that kind of shape me. So I am going to leave you, and I'm not kind of sure there's anything else tonight. I think it's a bit quiet during the week, isn't it? But there's a question about the website earlier. Website is almost finished. There's just one or two niggles. It's technical things that we're just trying to kind of work through. Very different from yours, Michelle. Would like to hang out with you. Oh, fantastic! I think you would. Yeah. There was girls as well. It wasn't just boys. There was definitely girls as well. So and of course we encourage that. We didn't mind that in the slightest. Scarborough, Michelle, fantastic. I'll have a lovely time in Scarborough. So I'm going to leave that with you and wish you all very, very well. And I'm not quite sure when I'm next touring. I need to fill in some dates. But you can guarantee I'll be out and about in the very near future. So look forward to seeing you all very, very